I say let's just hop right in, because I think there are some burning questions when it comes to this topic, especially the potentiality of it. Gloria, if I can start with you, I was really curious if maybe you could help us understand and maybe sketch some analysis for us on what the economic and environmental benefits are when it comes to industrial and commercial zones investing in the captive renewable power plants that we're talking about.
Thank you for this wonderful question, and thank you for inviting us to the Berlin Energy Transition. I want to say that before anything else, when you talk about benefits and from both environmental and commercial, you need to appreciate that the energy transition is not going to happen through governments and large utilities doing it alone. It will be encompassing a whole lot of stakeholders, including the consumers who have made decisions to come in and produce their own power using renewables and scaling it up as they grow in demand. And this has a huge economic benefit for the industries themselves, because initially, the capital cost will be high, but as you go along, the cost of running those systems is much, much lower. In Zimbabwe, as an example, the reason why we got lots of commercial and industrial systems coming in is when in 2018, 2019, we were hit by an energy crisis.
Right.
And the one way of engaging the consumers was to say, put up your systems. And they said, oh yeah, let's go for that. And they've done that in a big way. And also there's also the new ESG governance regulations which are coming up, where most of the big industries are coming up and have to come up with a green certificate of one form or the other.
Okay.
And for them to be able to trade in the international markets,
it's a big incentive.
It's a big incentive.
Right.
And they will be able to do so because they do have their own green power into the energy mix.
Yeah.
And there's also accountability in terms of their environmental impacts as they do their work. So as a country, we are so happy that we have seen the growth of the commercial and industrial space. And they are also looking for much sustainable storage systems. And I'm happy about the green hydrogen issue, which has just been mentioned.
Yeah, especially.
Because it does come in and answer some of the issues in terms of providing. It's a new market, it's nascent, it's still expensive, but most of the companies are using the storage in terms of battery storage, which is still fairly expensive. But we still believe it's a much better environmental system which has brought in more of the companies coming up and saying...
than the status quo that we currently have.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you also give the example of people even doing that, putting their systems up. Especially, you mentioned the energy crisis. It's especially indeed when we talk about captive energy that is being used, when we're talking about a lack of infrastructure that is good at the transmission, or whether we're talking about a power outage, the potentiality is so big and it needs to be tapped into. Thomas, if I can look at you, the Access to Energy Institute, you really help a lot of SMEs in Nigeria, for example, in accessing clean and reliable energy in that way. Can you maybe help us understand and maybe sketch for us what the circumstances are that some of these SMEs are operating in?
Yes, with pleasure. When you translate industry and commerce to a Nigerian context, 96% of companies in Nigeria are small and medium enterprises. And unfortunately, most of them, if not all of them, rely on fossil fuel generators for their energy access.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to make your life miserable for a couple of seconds, but that's a sound that most enterprises in Nigeria work to daily.
Oh, wow.
So for those who have been in Abuja or Lagos or the largest city, the grid does not work as it does in Zimbabwe, for example. And just in terms of numbers, there's 220 million Nigerians. They have 5 gigawatt on the grid. Just in terms of comparison, Ireland is 5 million people, and they have 20 gigawatt on the grid. So it's just telling you the grid is not reliable in Nigeria, which is why people actually rely on fossil fuel generators. And that's the question we're trying to answer, is how does renewable energy help? We developed a solar generator, as we call it at the Access to Energy Institute. It's actually our customers who actually say, thank you, we're bringing a solar substitute for the fossil fuel generators. And the question we need to answer now is, how do you... So from a customer's perspective, you have the fuel generator, you put $40 of fuel in every month. Fuel price actually tripled in the last year in Nigeria. So over 2 years, you pay $1,000. And that's the price of a solar generators. So how do you provide the financing? Because every single customer who has a fossil fuel generator wants a solar one, because you don't want to, I'm not going to open the card again. This is, if you have a barber shop, if you have any kind of shop, you don't want that. And so the technology is there, the demand is there, and the question is, where does basically the financing come to actually switch 20 million is the number of generators which is estimated in Nigeria. And how do you basically cater for the demand of 20 million? Because you could get a fossil-free energy system in Nigeria just by replacing the fuel generators.
Can I actually ask you that question? Because initially I was going to ask you, how do we incentivize SMEs to sort of shift from these diesel-powered generators to solar-powered based generators? But then when you let us, not just me, but everyone in the room, when we hear this sound, and you played it for 2 seconds, but if it's the entire time that the operator is on, I don't think it's about incentivizing the people that are living through that. I think it's about sort of the model that we're operating in. So can you maybe sketch for us what that would look like in order to be able to let them make that transition?
So I'm looking at the back of the room. There's one of our partners, Hannah Kabir, who's the CEO of a local distributor. And I think she can testify to the fact that if you give customers a financing, 100% will want to switch from fossil to solar, because it makes economic sense after 2 years. The problem is, if you go to a bank, even if you're a successful entrepreneur, the bank will not give you a loan for 24 months. They will give you 6 months, and at a very high interest rate, which is going to make the product expensive. There's one element, so we provide the hardware at the A2EI, it's shipped to Abuja, and then companies like Creed's Energy from Hannah Kabir actually do the sales, the installation, the maintenance. We have an online platform where you can look at every system, and one element is carbon finance. Every system is saving 3 tons of carbon every year. So how do you make money for the businesswoman in the market in Abuja that decides to switch to solar? So how do you empower a carbon market in Nigeria, maybe through the online platform and just the transparency we bring? But in the end, it's a matter of financing. So where is basically the financing that a local distributor, Hannah, can access in dollar, and that she can repay in naira? And then obviously one of the big questions is what's happening to the foreign exchange risk, which for the Nigerian currency is very high. So, but it's important to understand technology is there, willingness to change is there, and it's just a matter of financing to actually get to a shift which is huge. And just one last number, there's 5 gigawatt on the grid in Nigeria, but there's 40 gigawatt. If you aggregate the capacity of all these fossil fuel generators, 40 gigawatt of 100% fossil fuel powered systems, that's the equivalent of 40 or 30 large coal power plants.
That really puts it into perspective.
In a country that is exporting crude oil and doesn't have a refinery yet. So, it's a massive chance to basically decarbonize the Nigerian economy.
I want to go to you, Dr. Magombo, because if you hear this, is that something that you second, the point of financing, or what do you think is needed to sort of make sure that we can transition better?
For us, as government, we've put in incentives for renewable energy to accelerate the uptake of renewable energy. We've reduced the tariffs on the zero-rated, the importation of renewable energy technologies. We have also come up with regulations which allow those who have their own captive power to give access to the grid and be able to net meter or bank with the grid and be able to use it elsewhere within the system. So there is a lot of collaboration between the utility and also the private sector to make sure that we sweep as much of this excess power which is now sitting within the commercial and industrial customers to ensure that we stabilize the grid. And most of it is at the point of consumption. And we are looking at not small systems here. We have a mine which has built a 35 megawatt power station as part of their ESG, but also as part of greening their power. And we have a lot of agricultural estates which have put up 3, 4, 5 megawatts, and that they can be able to use it during the time they are producing their tea. But when there's excess, they are able to bank it with the grid, they are able to net meter. And now we are introducing the ability of collaboration and cooperation with the utility such that any excess banked on the grid can actually be paid for in cash.
Right.
So there's a lot of incentives which we have put in place.
Yeah.
And financing is one of those areas which still remains an issue. But we have seen that as part of our renewable energy framework, we have introduced what we refer to as a prescribed asset status, which allows these companies to get funding from pension funds, which are much longer term.
Right. It's a public-private collaboration.
Yes, and it's also a lower cost than going to banks where, like he said, most of the bank funding will be maximum a year and high cost. But with these, it's up to 5 years and much more spread cost. So we have put in these private-public partnerships which allow for sharing of the energy if there's excess, but also for the financing of the projects so that the commercial and industrial customers don't carry the full cost upfront, because that was the main barrier.
I see that you want to respond.
I'd like to make just a comment, because you hear from Gloria a much wider array of solutions to basically making the energy situation better in Zimbabwe, which has to do with the fact that your grid is better than in Nigeria. And we did the math before, there's 7 to 8 times more energy per person in Zimbabwe than in Nigeria, which is why, in Nigeria it seems to be like, there's a couple of strategies, but they're very narrow, and that's why it boils down to one element, which is financing, more so than to the array of solutions that you can basically offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Might I thank you, because we've already reached the end of this session, but of the deep dive, I should say. But I think with a very clear conclusion, nobody wants to live through that. I think that's a given. And it's really about how do we enable that financing. From a government perspective, you're really full on working on those public-private partnerships to do so, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, because that number that you ended on in your previous answer, Thomas, I think that really goes to show that we have a long way to go into making that transition. I think I am not taking too much liberty into saying that if people want to walk up to either of you to ask questions, that's all right, probably. I see a nodding face and a very stern look.
Well, talking financing, we just launched a green genset facility last week in Kigali, because we had to basically, because there's no solution coming from the government or from the private banking sector yet in Nigeria.
And that needs
so we showed there's the technology, we did that, and now we built a facility which allows actually to lend in dollars and to repay in naira.
Right, so that's something that people can talk to you.
Anybody is in the financing sector and is
that wants to
interested
talk
in a
about
revolving
that,
facility,
make sure to do so. We do have to end, so I want to thank you. Thank you so much, Thomas Devoe, Dr. Gloria Magombo. Can we have a big round of applause for them?